What's up, guys? Chris and Steve here at F90 Garage. So we're talking about modifying your car, and a pretty common mod is like changing your intake. So we were just gonna talk about intakes today.
Yeah, so what I really want to get the video, or the objective of this video, is to show you guys when you go to buy a used car, a new car, when you're looking at a car just in general and you lift the hood, I want you guys to understand where everything is. And in this video, we're going to specifically focus on the intake system. So kind of knowing where the filters are, the intake for the car, why the front of the grill of the car has air inlets, what's the reason for that. So just focus on that, and we'll show you guys a stock, a modified, and a little bit more modified car, just so you guys get an idea of why it is the way it is.
So some people modify the intake to get a little bit more performance out of their car, and sometimes it's worth it, and then sometimes it's not. So we're gonna look at these three cars, like Chris said, and see is it worth it, because in your application it might or it might not.
So we're going to start off with the stock car first, and we're going to break it up into three sections just so it's easier for you guys to understand. It's going to be the grill with the holes in it, the mouths for the intake, and then the filters themselves here. So the first thing that happens when we start driving is air starts moving into where the grills are. So that's why you have holes in the grill, and you notice most cars have holes in the grill or some sort of design that allows airflow to move through. So when the airflow moves through, it goes into these intakes here, which we'll show close-up shots of. Once they move into the mouth of the intakes here, they go down through. Mercedes kind of has it hidden, but there's filters here, and the other cars will show you guys what those look like. Move through filters here, and then through the filter it goes in, and it goes through the turbos.
So on a lot of cars that you want to modify, you want to improve on this system, because the more air, the more fuel you can burn, and then the more power it'll make. So on this system right here, the mouth of the intake, like Chris said, they're in a pretty good spot, because they're getting air directly from outside here, not air from inside your engine bay, which would be a little bit hotter than outside. So hence you're getting pretty cool air to start with, right? So then when you go through, it goes through here, this is your filters, it goes to the turbos. The turbos are going to be compressing and sucking a lot of air anyway, so you're going to get pretty good efficiency. If you were to improve this, it's possible to get more gains out of this, but by making something with a little bit more volume and bigger surface area in the filter. But to get real actual gains from this such a good and complete system already, it might not be worth it, because you're going to need actual other modifications to help support this. Like, this is just an add-on. You wouldn't actually see, I wouldn't consider it worth it for this car, where downpipe and exhaust and stuff like that, in addition to the intake with a tune, then you'll actually see real gains. So changing the intake alone on this car, I wouldn't say it's worth it.
So guys, air is one of the components that you need in an engine in order to make it work and make the car function the way it's supposed to properly. So since this is a pretty good system already, since it's from the factory and it's tuned by AMG, let's go on to a car that's more modified and see if we see any improvements there. So here we have Steven's Infiniti G37, and he's done some modifications to the intake system, so I'll let him take it away.
Here, so on the stock intake for this car, the filters were right here in this location. And so the mouth for the filter was right here in front of it, under this piece of plastic. So it's getting air, from close to the grill, Chris's car. So the air will travel, go through the pipes until this is not a turbo car, but it has twin throttle bodies on one on each side. So I changed these. I got a little bit more volume in the pipes, and it relocated the filters, which is, it's hard to see, but they're right behind this. So now it's getting air from basically all the way out here. So the air here is going to be definitely cooler than the air in this location. So you do get a little bit of gain, and I wouldn't say it's enough power difference to where you can feel it. It drives the same to me with the stock intake. It'll sound a little different because it has a nicer, maybe high flow air filter. I'm not sure if they actually flow more, but they do. You do hear more of an induction noise, so you, at least in the mindset, it sounds like it's pulling more air.
Yeah, so one of the things what Steve mentioned is the heat, right? So if you ever drive your car on a hot day, you'll notice it might feel a little bit sluggish, and you don't really know why. But when you drive on a colder day, it feels a little bit more peppy, a little bit more zippy, and you have no idea what's going on. It's because the colder the air, the more dense it is, the more power the engine makes without you actually doing anything. So this, because we're changing locations, it just provides that extra little bit more in order to get that. And as Steve mentioned, you have the sound also. So when I used to have my car that I modified with a turbo, especially if you have a turbo car or supercharger, you're going to get that extra induction noise more than you would on a car that doesn't have a turbo.
And another thing, we saw where the factory location of the filter would be, where I guess the mouth of the intake, where it's pulling the air from here. And so I there's many different aftermarket options for like a car like this and maybe your car too. So I relocated the filters further to get colder air. Like, so it's right behind these, right? There's some aftermarket intakes you could buy if you're, especially if you're on a budget, and like there's a lot of stuff on eBay or just poorly designed stuff where they'll relocate the filters right here. So we could probably insert a picture of an example of that. So when the filters are here now, you know, you're gonna get that induction noise, which is gonna sound like it's pulling more air. You get those nice cone-shaped filters, but the air temperature here is gonna be a lot higher. So you're gonna be pulling a lot of hot air in the engine, and it might, and most likely, I would say, give you worse performance than the factory intake. So then you're doing yourself a disservice buying those, where they might be cheap, might be beneficial to if you're gonna do it, you would buy something a little bit more well thought out, well designed.
So the other thing is, in the way kind of car manufacturer or part manufacturers, should I say, that kind of get around that is they put something called a heat shield or a little shield around the air intake that kind of goes around the cone to block it from any of the, let's say for example the cone is here, you put a little metal piece here so that the heat gets absorbed by the metal and the cone is actually unaffected. And now we're going to move on to Steven's SC400, which is a little bit more modified than this, just to show you guys what the intake system looks like on that.
So before we look at my SC400, let's take a stock intake on the SC400. So this has a different engine than mine, obviously, but the intake is in the same location. So here you see, this is where the filter's in here, right? This is the mouth for the intake's down here. And Mitesh made some, this is his car, he made some modifications here to, I guess, make the mouth a little bit bigger, to pull some more air. And then it goes through, you have your mouth here, and then it goes to the throttle body. So you're getting the air from right here, and this is the size, this is the map, this is how your air travels. So on this car, this is my SC400, I have a 1J with a single turbo. So my intake's pretty simple. It's just this piece of pipe with a big Canon filter. So the reason I changed this and I don't have the stock map is I don't think this engine needs that. I have a map sensor located in the back corner right there, and then this intake's feeding the turbo. So I could have had the stock air box with the filter to feed this turbo, and the only reason I don't have that is because of a restriction. So at a certain point when you try to make a lot of horsepower, you're gonna need a lot more air, right? So the air, you need air to burn the fuel. So you're limited if you have like a pipe this size, and how much air could actually flow through that. And when you have a bigger turbo, it's going to need a lot. So that's why I went with something bigger. So something like this, you can't really use the stock intake on. You're going to want something, this is a 4-inch diameter right here, into a 4-inch inlet on that turbo. So on a heavy modified where there is other supporting mods like a turbo and a full exhaust system and whatever, so keeping a stock intake on a car like this is definitely not worth it. And if you're spending all the money on these other mods, you're going to be hurting yourself keeping the stock intake. So you need to change it.
So just a quick recap, focusing on the stock car, the Mercedes, the GLC, it's a really good system that AMG created, that Mercedes created. You don't really need to switch anything else. That one you could leave stock and you really don't need to switch anything out. The only reason I would think you might want to change the filters, maybe to a less restrictive one, or put filters on there if you can, is to get more of that turbo noise. But that's only going to get sound. You're not really going to get anything better. You might even be closer to where the turbos are, which create more heat, so it might actually hurt your performance.
Yeah, and on the Infinity, so if your car is like something like that, the stock system is pretty good, but they have aftermarket models that are better, and so you could improve it, or they have cheaper models that if you put it, it actually hurts your performance. So if you have a car something similar to that, you might want to research it and decide if you want to do it or not.
And then so for the Lexus, for the SC, since Steven really heavily modified it, or if you're really heavily modifying something, you're going to need a lot more air, you're going to need a lot more of everything else. So it makes sense to, upgrade your intake system to get as much air as you can possible in order to have that part covered. Yeah, so I hope you guys like this this video. I mean, we're going to try to make a series about a bunch of other different things in the engine, just so you guys can kind of understand in sort of a easy overview way. We don't really want to go too in depth with everything. Just kind of understand where everything is, and kind of sort of how everything works, just to, make it a little bit more educational. All right, guys, we'll catch you on the next one.